Join us here live every weekday morning at 7:30 a.m. Pacific, 10:30 Eastern Time for your quick political news and headlines to get your day started right. I'm Alex Mahajer. It is August 25th, Tuesday, and we are joined today by Shannon Freshour. Shannon is the Democrat running the seat, Congressman Jim Jordan in Ohio's 4th Congressional District, and is joining us live from Marysville, Ohio. Good morning, Shannon. How are you?
Good morning. How are you?
I'm doing okay. All things considered, it was a quite an interesting night last night at the Republican National Convention, which should probably be more appropriately called the Republican National Chaos Convention. But Shannon,
I just referred to it as Hellscape 2020.
Hellscape 2020. That's good. I like that. That should trend. Shannon, you are running in a district that houses two of Ohio's most liberal cities, but one of the most conservative congressmen in the United States House of Representatives, Jim Jordan, who really only came to national prominence because of his stalwart support of Donald Trump. So, yes. Because of gerrymandering, Jim Jordan is able to sit in a congressional seat and become a person who normally would have no platform, but has become quite an influential member of the Republican Party. Do you see a problem with that, and what do we need to do to change it?
Well, I mean, there's obviously a huge problem with gerrymandering in general, and it's on both sides, because what happens is you end up having districts where A, the representative chooses the voters, but B, you also have this need to pull to the extremes on whichever side that you're on, because you've taken out the middle, you've taken out any buffer to actually have a race where you actually have to, you know, what they called in the 90s under Clinton, triangulating to the middle. You know, you run to whatever side you need to for the primary, and then you have to come back to the middle to win a general election. But now the primary ends up being the most important election.
Right. And, you know, it's a problem because when extremists like Jim Jordan get into power, you know, it's the words of former Speaker of the House, John Boehner, who's a noted Republican. He has called a legislative terrorist. And yes, we have seen that in full view.
And that was the nice thing he said about him.
Indeed. And, you know, John Boehner was no friend of the Democratic Party or the liberal movement or progressive movement. Yeah. But when you've got a staunch conservative calling Jim Jordan a legislative terrorist, among other things, it should be telling. And yet, because of gerrymandering, he continues to sit in that district.
Well, what's interesting about that is Boehner, when he was speaker, and there's actually emails that prove this, he was, as a congressman, he was not supposed to have any part in redistricting. But because we have we've had a supermajority in the state house for at least a decade, he worked with the Republicans to cut the lines. And he said, I want 12 Republican seats and 4 Democratic seats coming out of redistricting. Now, we're a 50-50 state. We are an absolute true battleground state. But because they had this, the only way that they could do it, he hated Jordan from the time that they served in the state house together. And he had asked, this is the story I've always been told, that he tried to get Jordan's district drawn out. But to do that, they couldn't keep the 12 and 4. And so when Boehner was faced with do I take the 12 and 4 or do I take getting rid of Jordan, he decided that if they could get Jordan a district that he would be like, it had no media markets and was sort of in the middle of nowhere, he could keep him quiet.
Right.
And that's what it just didn't work, is unfortunately the sort of the problem with that.
Right.
The idea was to keep him contained in this stuff district where he could touch all of the media markets, but not actually have any of them in his district.
Right. And Shannon, we have a lot of people joining in and chiming in. Lucia, we've got...
Hi, everyone.
Ruby John says, please get rid of Jim Jordan.
I am working every day to make that happen.
And we will let people know how they can support you in a minute. But we got another comment saying, Trump is saying law and order, but half of his administration is in jail. I just think that is a great point. And the RNC was, and I do want to touch on that in a second too, but I want to point out that it's very interesting to me of the people that led lock her up chants during the 2016 Republican convention are now in prison or under indictment. Christopher Drago says, good morning. We are joined this morning by Shannon on the AM report. Shannon is running for Congress in Ohio's 4th congressional district. She is the Democrat seeking to unseat Congressman Jim Jordan, who we are going in on this morning, Shannon. So we know that he was called a legislative terrorist by Jim Jordan, and we have seen that in full view with Mr. Jordan's performances in the national limelight. First, in his pugnacious defense of Donald Trump in last year's impeachment hearings, and then most recently in his performance at the RNC last night and during the House congressional hearings of the U.S. Postmaster General Louis DeJoy yesterday. And those were both yesterday, so it's a great morning to have you. Get into both of those. First, let's go into the Trump administration's attempts to strip funding and slow down the U.S. Postal Service and Jim Jordan's take on that. And what is your take?
Well, I mean, Jim Jordan gave up the game yesterday. He basically said, we're going to count the number, the people who vote, and we want to make sure that is the, and then we're going to declare victory, and then we're not going to count the votes that come in afterwards. And Republicans are committed to not having Americans vote, which is weird because that's the job of a legislator, is to make sure that people have the right to vote, especially in a democracy. We want people to vote. We want as many people to participate in the process as possible. Everyone should have the right to vote. This is, and this is very much the Democratic philosophy. It is very much not the Republican philosophy. And the worst part about this is not that it is that they're trying to, deny people the right to vote and screw with an election. But it's also the fact that Jordan, while helping Trump attack the post office, is hurting his own constituents. An attack on the Postal Service is an attack on rural America. It absolutely is. Because the people who benefit the most from the post office are people in rural areas who aren't served by, FedEx. They contract out to FedEx contracts out, UPS contracts out to the post office to do the final deliveries. And so that's really the part where this is really, really harmful, because things like Social Security checks and prescription drugs and everything, and in COVID, where people can't talk to their grandkids and they may not understand technology, they may be in a broadband situation where rural America doesn't have great broadband. So they get letters from their family. If we're screwing with the post office, we're taking away people's ability to communicate with their families, to have their life-saving drugs, to have the money that's going to sustain them, and the right to vote.
Right. And I think that's a great point. And, Congressman Jim Jordan was calling the entire U.S. Postal Service debacle a conspiracy by the Democrats. And this was a messaging that came out of the Republican National Convention last night, which I thought was very unusual. I've been watching political conventions my whole life. Okay. It is so unusual to hear an entire convention around denigrating and attacking the opposing party. The Republican Party totally absolved itself of even announcing a platform.
Which is insane. Which is utterly insane.
It is insane. And so, this is really quite unusual. And to have Jim Jordan call it a conspiracy, he's playing into this conspiracist, Looney Tunes.
He's a conspiracist. He is. I mean, the QAnon supporter in Georgia, who was just won the primary in Georgia, was heavily supported by Jim Jordan, endorsed and heavily supported. He will tell you every day of the week that the Russian attack on the American electorate was a hoax. It was an attack it was a way to hurt Trump. He will tell you, he refuses to wear a mask. He is absolutely embedded in conspiracy theories. And that is terrifying because of the consequences to our district, to people all over.
And I'll note that QAnon has been named a terrorist group by intelligence officials, a domestic terrorist group. So this is the people that Jim Jordan and Donald Trump, whose messaging is being touted and then proliferated through social media channels, which I think is very, very unfortunate. So I do also want to touch really quickly while we have some time. We do have a comment from Christopher Drago. Forgive me, Donald Trump is a hoax. Earlier this year, six former wrestlers from the Ohio State University came forward to allege that Jim Jordan, who was an assistant coach at Ohio State at the time, knew about an abusive OSU doctor named Dr. Strauss, Richard Strauss, committed sexual abuse on an independent report commissioned by the university concluded last year that sexual abuse was conducted against at least 177 male student patients between 1979 and 1998. And at least six former wrestlers came forward just this year to say that Jim Jordan knew about the abuse and turned a blind eye to it. What the story has gotten buried amidst all the craziness that already exists in the Republican.
It has gotten buried outside of Ohio. It still has an enormous impact in Ohio because there are, the fight to bring justice to the survivors. It is horrifying, and I'm always very concerned about making sure that the survivors don't feel like I'm exploiting them. But I also want to make sure that they know that they will have an advocate. One of the worst stories I've heard coming out of all of this was a year ago, last 4th of July. And this is a testimony that's been given under oath to the State House because our state legislature is still trying to fight for the survivors. So they brought in the person who was the wrestling coach when Jim Jordan was the assistant wrestling coach. Or I'm sorry, he was the captain of the wrestling team when Jordan was the assistant wrestling coach. To come in and say that he got a call last 4th of July from Jordan, and in his words, was crying and begging and saying, tell them I didn't know. You have to tell them I didn't know. My career is on the line. Just tell them that they were lying, that the people who said that they told me were lying. The worst part about this story, the absolute worst part about this story is it unconscionable that you would call someone and beg them to say that survivors of sexual assault were lying, first of all. What makes it 100 times worse is the captain of the wrestling team, the person that he wanted the captain of the wrestling team to lie about and say that it didn't happen, was the captain's brother. He literally tried to have one brother turn and protect him over his own brother, which is unconscionable to me. It is so far beyond the pale unconscionable, I can't even put it into words.
I agree with you. And
that's, there's just it's so, I have, as a little sister, the idea that my brother would turn against me to protect someone else is insane. And the fact that you would even call and ask someone to do that is mind-boggling, that you are so obsessed with keeping your job and your power that you would basically try and pull a Cain and Abel. It's mind-boggling.
Yeah. I think it's really clear that Jim Jordan needs to go. And so before we go, I just want to ask if you just to tell us a little bit about what you're proposing for Ohio's 4th Congressional District, and then let us know where we can find and support you.
Absolutely. Thank you. I think one of the key things that our district has been lacking since Jordan took office is any sort of constituent services. There's two jobs of a representative. The first one is to legislate, and we don't have a legislator either. So we need someone who's willing to fight legislatively for our district to make sure that we have, parts bringing home jobs and bringing home farm subsidies and the things that like small business loans and, the HEROES Act, which would help our communities fund first responders and schools and to pay for PPEs and so that they could open schools. The other half of that is constituent services, which is that if you have a problem where you need an advocate for the state government or the federal government, you call your congressperson's office and you say, "Hi, my name is Shannon, and I need my Social Security check hasn't shown up in 3 months. Can you help me?" And you go through and they have literally pay advocates to go and advocate on your behalf. That's part of what your taxes are supposed to pay for. Our district doesn't have that. And that is one of the key things that I am most committed to bringing in as quickly as possible. And the other thing is that having, for our district, you shouldn't have to watch the news, or, and watch like Colbert or Jimmy Kimmel, Saturday Night Live, and have your congressperson made fun of. It reflects badly on you. Your congressperson shouldn't be an embarrassment to your district, and ours is.
Amen. That's 100%. Shannon, where can people find you and support you if they want to get behind your campaign with about 69?
Sure. You can find me on Twitter at Shannon Freshour. So it's SHANNON, F like Frank, RESXAMHOUR. Or you can go to my website, which has everything, and that's Shannon for Ohio, and it's the number 4 for Ohio.com.
Thank you so much. This has been Shannon Freshour. How do you say your last name again?
Freshour.
I've been saying Freshour, and that's my own ignorance, and I apologize.
Don't worry about it. I'm used to
it. And she is running for Congress in Ohio's 4th congressional district to unseat Republican Congressman Jim Jordan. Christopher Drago says, "Sounds great, Shannon. Best of luck. I support you all the way."
Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you so much for joining. This has been the AM Report with Alex Mahajer for HAPS News, the network of now. We are live every weekday morning at 7:30 Pacific, 10:30 Eastern. Join us for your quick political news and headlines. We will let you get you on your day started out just right. And if you'd like to sponsor and support this journalism, please consider doing so. You can do it at haps.tv/@Alex Mahajer. Have a wonderful Tuesday.